My daughter called it my cozy nook. I called it a prison. For months, I lived in silence, a forgotten shadow in my own child's home. But even a shadow can cast a long, unexpected light. What happens when an aging mother decides her silence is no longer golden, but a cage, and strikes back with devastating truth? The air in my bedroom is always stale, thick with the scent of mothballs and aging cardboard. My daughter, Charlie, calls it my cozy nook. The term feels like a small, sharp stone in my shoe every time she says it. There are no windows. A single, bare bulb hangs from the ceiling, casting a weak, yellow light on the towers of boxes that form 3 of my walls. The 4th is concrete. My bed is an army cot, a thin mattress laid over a squeaking metal frame. I am 72 years old, and I live in a storage room. It's been 6 months since I moved in. 6 months since my husband of 45 years, Arthur, passed away, leaving a silence in our home so vast it felt like a physical presence. In the fog of my grief, Charlie had descended like an angel of mercy. "Mom, I can't bear the thought of you rattling around in that big house all alone," she'd said, her voice dripping with concern. "It's too much for you to manage, just sell it. You can move in with me and Mark. I'll take care of everything." I was drowning and she threw me a line. I clung to it. The idea of not having to make another decision, of being cared for after a lifetime of caring for others, was intoxicating. So I agreed. I signed the papers for the sale of the house where I'd raised my child, baked thousands of cookies, and held my husband's hand on our porch swing. I packed a few precious keepsakes, believing I was moving into a new chapter of family warmth. To the outside world, especially to our church community, my Charlie is a saint. She tells everyone with a humble sigh about the sacrifices she's made to take in her aging mother. "It's the least I could do," she'd say at coffee hour after Sunday service, patting my hand. "Family is everything." The neighbors praise her, the pastor commends her filial piety. And I just sit there and smile, the silent, grateful prop in the stage play of her perfect life. My days are governed by a silent, unwritten rulebook. I am to be up and finished with my shower before 6:30 am, long before Charlie and her husband, Mark, need the bathroom. "It just makes the mornings run smoother, Mom," Charlie had explained brightly, as if it were a clever life hack and not a decree. "You wouldn't want to hold us up, would you?" My breakfast is whatever is left over and easy to grab, eaten quietly in my nook while they bustle around the kitchen, their conversation a wall of noise I'm not expected to breach. My pension check, the modest but steady income Arthur's careful planning had secured for me, is now deposited directly into Charlie's account. "It's just easier to manage all the household finances from one place," she declared, taking my bank card with a decisive little nod. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about bills." She hands me a crisp $20 bill every Monday morning. "Here's a little something for you, Mom, for incidentals." $20. My weekly allowance doled out from my own money as if I were a teenager. The first time, I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Then I almost cried. The small joys that once defined my life have been systematically pruned away. I've always had a gift with plants, my hands finding solace in the soil. Back at my old house, my garden was a riot of color, my windowsills crowded with African violets and orchids. When I first moved in, I brought a small pot of geraniums, a cutting from a plant Arthur had given me on our first anniversary. I set it on the patio, hoping to tend to it. The next day it was gone. "Oh, Mom," Charlie had said, her tone a familiar mix of pity and impatience. "I threw it out. We can't have dirt and bugs being tracked into the house. It's just not hygienic." I've tried to speak up, to reclaim a sliver of my own life. I've started sentences with, "Charlie, I was thinking," or "could we perhaps," but they always trail off, cut down by her cheerful dismissiveness. "Mom, I'm doing all of this for your own good. You've worked hard your whole life. Now is your time to rest, to let me take the lead." Her words are always coated in the sweetness of concern, but the message is clear. My thoughts are irrelevant, my desires are inconvenient, and my role is to be a quiet, compliant burden. I am not a person anymore. I am a problem that she has heroically solved. And with each passing day, the weight of her care feels less like a comfort and more like a cage. The final thread of my delusions snapped on a Tuesday. It was a quiet, unremarkable day, which made the discovery all the more jarring. The breaking point wasn't a shout or a slammed door, it was an absence. My rocking chair was gone. It wasn't just any chair. It was a solid oak rocker, built by Arthur's own hands in his workshop the year Charlie was born. The wood was worn smooth in the places where my hands and head had rested for 4 decades. It was where I had rocked my daughter to sleep, where I had read hundreds of stories, where I had sat with Arthur in comfortable silence on rainy afternoons. It was the one large piece of furniture I had insisted on bringing from the old house, a tangible link to a life of love and partnership. It was my anchor. I had tucked it into a corner of the garage, the only space it would fit, covering it carefully with an old sheet. When I went to get it, intending to simply sit in it for a few minutes and feel the familiar comfort of its embrace, the space was empty. A new, gleaming lawnmower stood in its place. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my chest. I rushed inside, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Charlie!" I called out, my voice higher than usual. Charlie, the rocking chair, my oak chair from the garage. It's not there. She was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, a half-empty glass of wine beside her. She didn't look up. "Oh, that old thing," she said, her thumb flicking across the screen. "It was taking up so much space. I donated it to the church for the charity drive last week. It was a great write-off for us on our taxes." She finally glanced at me, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Honestly, Mom, you need to learn to let go of the past." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. A write-off. My anchor, my history, the last physical piece of my husband's love, reduced to a line item on a tax form. It wasn't just about the chair. It was the casual, thoughtless cruelty of it, the complete and utter disregard for what it meant to me. In her world, my memories had a price, and that price was less than the value of a tax deduction. In that moment, the carefully constructed facade of her care crumbled into dust, revealing the cold, transactional reality beneath. I wasn't her mother. I was an asset to be managed, and my sentimental attachments were liabilities to be liquidated. That night, I didn't sleep in the cot. I sat on the cold concrete floor of my storage room, my back pressed against a large box labeled Christmas ornaments, and felt the chills seep deep into my bones. For the first time since Arthur died, I didn't cry. The grief was still a hollow ache in my chest, but the fog of sorrow had been burned away by the searing heat of Charlie's words. "A write-off. You need to learn to let go of the past." The Grace who trusted, who made excuses, who believed in the fiction of her daughter's love, had quietly expired on this cold floor. In her place, a new woman was stirring, one forged in the silent, airless dark. A profound, chilling calm settled over me. My mind, for months a whirlwind of confusion and sadness, was now startlingly clear. The next morning, I made a decision. It was Wednesday, the day of the church's weekly senior coffee morning. I usually made an excuse to stay home, unable to bear the performance of being Charlie's grateful, silent mother. But today, I put on my favorite lavender dress, the one Arthur always said brought out the color of my eyes. It was a small act of defiance, a way of reminding myself that I was still Grace before I was anyone's mother or burden. I went with a purpose. I found a seat at a table with a leaner Vance, a widow in her 80s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She was known for her directness, but it was always tempered with a deep well of kindness. She took one look at me, her smile softening with genuine concern. "Grace, dear," she said, her voice a low, comforting hum. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." And for the first time, I let the mask slip. I didn't unleash a torrent of accusations. Instead, I spoke carefully, testing the words in the air. I spoke of the loneliness, the feeling of being adrift in someone else's life, of missing the simple agency of deciding what to do with my own day. "It's been a big adjustment," I said, my voice quiet. "Charlie is so good to me, so busy taking care of everything. I try not to be a bother." Elena just listened, her gaze unwavering. She read the novel I had written in those few sentences. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. She placed her warm, dry hand over mine. "Your feelings are valid, Grace," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel that they aren't. They are real and they matter." Her words were oxygen. For months, Charlie's chipper dismissals had made me question my own sanity, making me feel that my sadness was an ungrateful overreaction. Eleanor's simple validation was permission to trust myself again. As we were getting up to leave, she gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "Don't forget, dear," she said, and her eyes held a knowing glint. "Sunday's service is the annual family gratitude testimony. I remember how beautifully Charlie spoke last year about the blessing of having you move in. She's quite the orator. Orator, performance." The words clicked into place. A plan bloomed in my mind, not from malice, but from a desperate need for the truth to have its own stage. Charlie had built her public reputation on a foundation of my silent suffering. The stage was already set, the audience already gathered. All I had to do was speak my own lines. For the rest of the week, in the stale, quiet air of my cozy nook, I began to compose my speech. My prison had become my war room. I whispered the words to myself, polishing each phrase until it shone with a devastating, undeniable honesty. I would thank her. Oh, yes, I would thank her for everything. Sunday morning arrived, bright and clear. Charlie was a vision of suburban piety, dressed in a tasteful floral dress, her face glowing with self-satisfaction. She fussed over me before we left, straightening the collar of my blouse and patting my shoulder. "Now, Mom, you look so sweet," she said, her voice loud enough for Mark to hear from the other room. "Everyone will be so happy to see you." It felt like a director giving last-minute notes to a minor character. In the polished pews of the church, we were the picture of a happy, multi-generational family. Charlie sat between Mark and me, a protective arm draped over the back of the pew behind me. She smiled and waved at friends, her performance in full swing. When Pastor Dave announced the beginning of the family gratitude testimonies, she gave my hand a squeeze, as if we were sharing a special secret. Of course, she volunteered to speak first. She walked to the lectern with practiced poise, her voice filled with emotion as she recounted the difficult but rewarding journey of the past year. She spoke of her deep love for me, her desire to honor me in my twilight years. "It's a sacrifice, yes," she concluded, dabbing a perfectly dry eye with a tissue. "But it's the greatest blessing to be able to give back to the woman who gave me everything. Having my mother in our home has filled it with so much love." The congregation was captivated. There were soft murmurs of "Amen" and "What a wonderful daughter." She returned to her seat amidst a wave of appreciative smiles, basking in the warm glow of public admiration. Then Pastor Dave smiled out at the congregation. "That was beautiful, Charlie. Thank you." He paused, looking directly at our pew. "And Grace, it's so wonderful to have you with us. I'm sure your heart is just overflowing. Would you care to add a few words, to share what it's been like from your perspective?" A flicker of panic crossed Charlie's face. This was not part of her script. She started to lean over, to whisper that I was too frail or too shy, but I was already standing up. I gave her hand a gentle pat, a perfect mimicry of her own gesture. "I'd be honored, Pastor," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. As I walked slowly towards the front, a hush fell over the church. All eyes were on me. I gripped the sides of the wooden lectern, my knuckles white. I took a deep breath, looked out over the sea of familiar faces, and landed my gaze directly on my daughter. "I want to thank God for my blessings," I began, my voice trembling just enough to be authentic. "And most of all, I want to thank my daughter, Charlie." I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Charlie preened. "When my Arthur passed, she opened her home to me. She gave me a roof over my head." I let a tear trace a path down my cheek. It may only be a small storage room with no windows, but it keeps the rain out. She taught me a valuable lesson in non-attachment by donating all my old things, like the rocking chair my husband built for me. It taught me not to cling to the past. The silence in the church was no longer appreciative. It was sharp, heavy, and stunned. I could see people shifting in their seats, exchanging confused glances. She even takes care of all my finances, taking my entire pension so I don't have to worry my old head about bills. She gives me $20 a week for anything I might need, teaching me humility and frugality. My voice cracked on the word, humility. Charlie has given me the gift of a truly simple life, a cozy nook where I have nothing, and therefore want for nothing. Thank you, my daughter, for giving me a place to live out my final years. In a way I never, ever could have imagined. I finished, my gaze locked on Charlie. Her face was a mask of horror, her skin as white as the communion cloths. The warm glow of admiration she had bathed in just moments before had been extinguished, replaced by the cold, hard stares of her friends and neighbors. The quiet whispers started then, spreading through the pews like a fire. The filial daughter had been unmasked. The car ride home was a tomb of silence. The air was so thick with unspoken fury, I felt I might suffocate. Charlie gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her jaw clenched so tightly I was surprised her teeth didn't crack. Mark stared straight ahead, a muscle twitching in his cheek, refusing to meet my eyes or his wife's. I sat in the back, my hands folded calmly in my lap, and watched the familiar suburban houses slide by, looking exactly the same as they had an hour ago, though everything had changed. The moment the front door clicked shut behind us, the dam of Charlie's rage burst. "How could you?" she shrieked, whirling on me. Her face was blotchy and red, her carefully constructed composure shattered into a million pieces. "How could you do that to me? In front of everyone, in front of the pastor, you humiliated me." "I simply told the truth, Charlie," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through her hysteria like a surgeon's scalpel. "Every word I said on that stage was a version of something you have said to me. I just provided the context you always leave out. I gave you a home," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I took you in. You put me in a closet," I replied, my voice unwavering. "You took my money, you took my memories, and you patted yourself on the back for it. That is not care, Charlie. That is warehousing." She stared at me, speechless for a moment, the sheer audacity of my calm rebellion seeming to short-circuit her brain. Then she tried a different tactic, the one that had always worked before. Tears welled in her eyes. "Mom, I didn't realize. I was just trying to help." But the woman who would have fallen for that, the woman who would have rushed to comfort her weeping daughter and absolve her of all guilt, was gone. "It's too late for that," I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I have already spoken with a legal aid lawyer. I paid for the consultation with the $20 you gave me last Monday." I laid the paper on the hall table. "I expect my bank cards, my pension details, and my personal documents to be on this table by tomorrow morning. I also expect a full accounting of the money from the sale of my house and my furniture. You have 1 week to transfer the balance to a new account, which I will provide you the details for. I have already put a deposit down on a lovely apartment at the Silver Creek Senior Residence. I move out next Saturday." Her jaw dropped. The tears vanished, replaced by stark disbelief, then panic. She cycled through it all, threats about my incompetence, sobbing apologies, desperate promises that things would be different. But she wasn't talking to her mother anymore. She was negotiating with a stranger, and she had absolutely nothing left to offer. The old order had not just been challenged. It had been dismantled, piece by piece, right in front of her eyes. 3 months later, the afternoon sun streamed into my new apartment, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the light. It was a proper one-bedroom, with a large window in the living room that looked out over a shared garden, currently bursting with late summer roses. My own pots of geraniums and African violets crowded the windowsill, thriving. Eleanor and I were sitting at my small dining table, a proper oak one I'd found at a second-hand shop, sipping tea from my own floral teacups. On the wall behind her hung a beautifully framed photograph of Arthur and me on our wedding day, young and impossibly happy. I managed my own finances now. I'd joined a book club and a gardening group within the residence. I had coffee with Eleanor every Wednesday, and on Fridays, a group of us played a fiercely competitive game of bridge. I had a life that was quiet, my own, and filled with the simple dignities I had been starved of. The silence in my apartment wasn't the oppressive, stale silence of the storage room. It was the peaceful, restorative silence of solitude. I occasionally heard things about Charlie through the community grapevine. I heard that Pastor Dave had a long and frank conversation with her. I heard that several of her closest friends were now distant, their invitations to dinner parties having mysteriously dried up. Mark, I was told, looked perpetually miserable, but these were just echoes from a world I no longer inhabited. They didn't stir anger or satisfaction in me, only a quiet, detached pity. Her life, her reputation, her self-inflicted isolation. It was no longer my burden to carry. I picked up my teacup, the warm ceramic a comfort in my hands. Elinor smiled at me, her eyes kind. "To freedom," I said, raising my cup. "To freedom," she echoed, her cup clinking softly against mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the future stretching out before me, not as a threat, but as a promise. Thank you for listening to Grace's story. If her journey for dignity and freedom resonated with you, please consider following our channel for more stories like this. And remember, your own story matters. If you feel comfortable, share your experiences in the comments below. You never know who you might help by speaking your truth.